I'm Bob Brill. He's Eric Kramer. And welcome to Kramer and Brill Fantasy Football Podcast. And now a video cast as well. You can hear the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, radio.com, and wherever you get your podcasts. And now you can also see the video cast on YouTube by going to my Bob Brill YouTube channel or by finding the links for all of this at kramerandbrill.com. That's the easiest way, kramerandbrill.com. We'll take a look at how we did for you, a look at this week's games, who's trending, and our feature Ask the Quarterback. Now, each week, we select a fan who writes in to ask Eric a fantasy football-related question. We'll bring the fan to the video podcast to ask that question directly. And you can be that fan by simply emailing us at brillpro@gmail.com. That's brillpro@gmail.com. You can see it right there on your screen. So please do that. So how do we do for you? Well, we liked Murray, Mahomes, and Rodgers, along with Roethlisberger and Drew Lock, and they all had good days, throwing at least 3 touchdown passes each, with Murray adding 108 yards rushing and a score. We also love Josh Allen, who led all quarterbacks with 415 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 rushing. Can't beat that for fantasy. Now, you did not like Lamar Jackson this week, and he had another off week, 170, only 1 score, and that was a rushing touchdown. We said to ride Dalvin Cook and his 206 yards rushing and a pair of TDs got him 40-plus fantasy points again. Otherwise, not much of a day for RB1s, except for the return of Christian McCaffrey, who fooled everyone by not being rusty. 69 yards and a touch, but the 10 catches really went off. Another touch for 37 fantasy points in PPR. Now, we said to bench Ezekiel Elliott, and his 9 fantasy points proved us right. We did like DJ Dallas in Seattle, who had 12 fantasy points. As per the usual, the whiteouts led the parade, and everybody we liked had solid days, including McLaurin, Metcalf, Fuller, and Adams. But who saw Richie James of the Niners with 9 catches for 184 and a score? Now, that's 35 fantasy points, folks. He's available, or was, because it may be too late to grab him in serious leagues. Tight ends were led by Kelsey with 10 catches, 159 yards. Trending up this week, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, DK Metcalf, DJ Dallas, Kyler Murray, Christian Kirk, A.J. Brown, Alex Smith, Jake Luton, Garrett Gilbert, Richie James, Mason Rudolph. Now, if you don't know who those last 4 names are, you're pretty much in with the rest of the football world. Trending down this week, Lamar Jackson, the Seattle defense, Kyle Allen, Ezekiel Elliott, David Johnson, Preston Williams, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, and Jalen Samuels. So, my friend, your thoughts on this week?
Well, I guess like probably a lot of people, I did not see Lamar Jackson this year really not answering. He won the MVP last year and then had the kind of let down in the playoffs. I would have thought he would have picked up on that and kind of advanced a little bit further, as with their entire offense and team. But every time you think they're going to make a move, for some reason, he stepped backward. He's still a very talented guy. Maybe if you think about it, talent, skill-wise, maybe the most talented quarterback in the NFL right now. But I think for some reason, it just hasn't clicked, as consistently as I would have thought. But then on the other hand, you've got 2 young guys like Joe Burrow, who had the week off, but then Justin Herbert as well, played lights out again, but yet in another loss for the Chargers. And I can't figure them out, although they're as productive as anybody offensively. And then, here the Seahawks are having offensively probably their best season ever. And Russell Wilson now is probably the leading MVP candidate, and yet they've got the worst defense in the league. And there just seems to be, along with all those little, very small amount of 3 fantasy things I've thrown out there so far, just the NFL in general seems to be a bit confusing to me, because you've got teams that look for several weeks unbeatable, like the Buccaneers, and then show up against the Saints for the second time and looked horrible. And that happens like there's no one breakout team this year that can sustain it, even though your Steelers, right, are 9-0.
Yep.
They've looked very vulnerable at times. And here now, obviously, we'll talk about this a little further as we go along, but I don't care if it's the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Rams, the Buffalo Bills, the Seahawks, as we mentioned. No one seems to be able to kind of win the one game that kind of puts that statement that they are the team this year. And I simply can't figure it out.
It's sort of like welcome to the NFL, huh?
I guess
It's
so.
it's really bizarre. I mean, like you said, the Steelers they're undefeated, but at the same time, the last couple of games, I mean, they played down to Dallas. They didn't play up
Yeah,
to their
right.
game. They played down to Dallas, and I mean, everybody expected a Dallas blowout, and they barely hung on with their fingernails, to win that game.
I think that goes to show you, at least my experience, as I look back, the NFL football season is a marathon. It is
Mhm.
not a sprint, and it's literally, I want to say week to week, but it's not even that. It's meeting to meeting. It's practice to practice, and to try to keep yourself up at a high level. Remember, all these teams you're playing, I mean, they get paid too. They get coached well. And it's a tough thing to win a game, much less as the Steelers, like we was talking about. They're 9-0, but they haven't won dominantly in those 9 games.
Oh, yeah.
Some they have, but it's just it's a crapshoot, like you said. Welcome to the NFL.
Now we come to our regular feature, and that is Ask the Quarterback. Today we welcome in Matt Park, who is attending the University of Oregon, who's a longtime fantasy football owner and a long-suffering Chargers fan. Matt, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, Bob, as you mentioned, I'm a longtime fantasy owner, longtime suffering Chargers fan. So, I hate to say it, but used to some of these, or just used to having my heart ripped out of me by the football gods. So that's why I've also turned to fantasy football to kind of distract myself from some of that pain. So as of right now, I am in a eighth year league of record. I'm the commissioner in this league. I have embarrassingly never won the trophy. So I'm hoping to make this year the first year as I sit here at 6-3 after this week.
Wow, 6-3.
But yes, having a pretty good season so far, but still, having, fingers crossed, it's a pretty competitive league. But thanks again for having me, guys.
Appreciate you're welcome. Well, thanks for coming on. So what would you like to ask Eric?
So I know you guys are pretty knowledgeable about, dynasty league. So I wanted to go ahead and ask a question about a couple rookie running backs I have, but specifically Mr. Jonathan Taylor of the Colts. So I drafted this guy in the kind of mid rounds of my league. I wasn't expecting him to be my starting RB, and thankfully he's not. But I really bought into the hype. Everything I saw at Wisconsin was real impressive. He's behind a really good offensive line in Indianapolis, but he's had 2 very lackluster weeks coming off the bye. So I'm now wondering, okay, do I leave him on my bench? Do I try and trade him? I don't know what I could get for him, or do I cut him outright? It's a little frustrating, but kind of want to solution out of this problem.
Okay, I feel your pain, Matt. And what I would say, so Jonathan Taylor, okay, he's an excellent running back, and it is, you said, this is a keeper league you're in with him. As I look at it, he's got 2 big issues, one bigger slightly than the other. And the first one is he's got this fumbling issue, which as a running back in the NFL, once you have that, it's a kind of a near-death experience. And look back at Tiki Barber's career. He was explosive at times, but then he ran into a fumbling problem, and he became baggage for the Giants. And then just simply with paying more attention to the fundamental of keeping the ball high and tight at all times, he became the poster child for how to do that. Then didn't have a fumbling problem. He got to turn a weakness, what was once a weakness at least, into a strength. And I think for Jonathan Taylor, he's got to find a way to get back away from what he's doing now in terms of coughing the ball up, if they'll give him that chance. And, as I think obviously following him, that the Colts have other options right now. The other thing that hurts Jonathan Taylor, he's not a natural pass catcher. And yet here Nyheim Hines, in the last couple of weeks has exploded receiving the ball. And that is one of his strengths. And then you've got the idea that Marlon Mack, I think it is, right? That is kind of their established number 1 back, even though he's not been playing lately. And then you got the emergence of now Jordan Wilkins. I think that makes it, he's got some hurdles to go over now, Jonathan Taylor. But if you think about the stock trader mentality of buying low and selling high, if you were to trade Jonathan Taylor right now, you'd be selling low, which I don't think that's a good option too. And as you know, The Colts, really, they're not a passing team. Obviously, Philip Rivers started out thinking that way, but now he's settled into, relying on a good defense, timely throwing, sure, but then they've got a solid offense of line, like you mentioned, and a great running game. So where Jonathan Taylor fits back in all that, I don't know, but I think he's talented enough that, unlike Zeke Elliott with the Cowboys this year, where Bob and I were both saying a couple of weeks ago, this is someone you might want to get rid of if you can. Even if it's a struggle, still get rid of him. I think Jonathan Taylor is different because the pieces around him are all working just fine. The offensive line is great. The defense is great. I think he will come back. At what time that happens, I can't tell you. But I think it's simply an issue of hanging onto the ball, and that he can fix.
Right now, it looks like you're heading to the playoffs, right? If you are consistent with what you've done so far.
Yes, yeah. So like I said, I'm sitting at 6-3 right now. Had a victory this week. I've got two guys at running back I can start between Derrick Henry and Joe Mixon, and now Jonathan Taylor is kind of my potential RB2-3-ish. But again, it's just I am headed in a positive direction, but I still have a couple players on the roster that I'm still pretty unsure what to do with.
Yeah. How long is your season? 13 games.
We go playoffs start in week 14. Week 14.
So you're 9 games. So you got 4 more games, 10, 11, 12. Yeah. So you're pretty close. Yeah. That's if you got to make a trade, if there's an overwhelming trade out there, you should consider it. But I think Eric's right. I like Jonathan Taylor, but there are issues there. Now you had a follow-up question about rookie running backs you wanted to ask, right?
Yeah, I mean, just on the topic of rookie running backs, I think it'd be a good time to ask. We're here, 9 weeks into the season, more than halfway through. There's a pretty interesting rookie class this year, especially for fantasy purposes. So I wanted to see what your assessment of rookie running backs was for this year, and how you would kind of evaluate them into next year based on everything we've seen so far.
I think.
Well, I think.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, sorry, Bob, but I was going to say that there's no really one superstar running back in this class. There's no Earl Campbell or Eric Dickerson or Barry Sanders or some guys that just instantly show up and you're like, wow, where'd that guy come from? But Edwards-Helaire with the Chiefs couldn't be in a better offense, and Andy Reid knows how to make use of a guy's talent like that is so dynamic. Dobbins, I think, with the Ravens is going to turn into that. He's not really a week in, week out starter, but I think as he grows into this offense, couple him with Lamar Jackson and eventually Mark Ingram when he comes back, he's going to be a dynamic player as well. Obviously, like you said, Jonathan Taylor's kind of, for now at least, hit the skids, but DeAndre Swift with the Lions is kind of, has games where he kind of elevates, and then he has games where he kind of slips. Just think back to week 1 where he dropped the pass in the end zone against would have beat the Bears. And, but I think over time, DeAndre Swift is one of those guys that's kind of the prototypical today's NFL running back. He's big, he's physical, he's got speed. He can catch. He just every now and then is going to drop a pass, like a lot of good guys do, or a lot of good backs do. Another one who I think that has the potential to really rise is Keyshawn Vaughn down in Tampa. He's a versatile back, again, like a lot of them are these days. And you'd figure a guy like Tom Brady can utilize in the short passing game a great running back coming out of the backfield, which he can. But then you got to think, if you're in a keeper league, yes, he's young and he's going to be good over time, but Tom Brady's not going to be around for an awful long time, you would think. So, I think, guys like Cam Akers, who with the Rams is in a dynamic offense with a dynamic play caller with lots of weapons around him. I got to think over time he's going to grow into a fantastic back. There's a lot of good options, like you said, Matt.
I personally like Antonio Gibson in Washington. I think he is really done a solid job coming in as a rookie. And a guy that maybe is a little bit of a sleeper, I really like because of his situation more than anything else. And he's very quick. That's P. Ryan in New York with the Jets. He's got Frank Gore in front of him. Frank Gore is, 1 billion years old. He's not going to be around every day. He may be traded or signed with as a free agent with somebody else, and I think P. Ryan's going to be the guy who's going to be their go-to guy, and the fact that they don't have a quarterback that is somebody who is settled on there means if they get into competitive games, P. Ryan's going to carry the ball. He's going to get volume. So I think, especially going forward, I think that he's an excellent option. So does that answer your question, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but back to P. Ryan, I'd like to believe that Frank Gore is going to be playing till he's at least 50. That has to happen, right?
Well, you may be right.
Surprising.
Yep.
Well, Matt, thanks for joining us here on Ask the Quarterback on Kramer and Brill. And we appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
You got it. Keep playing fantasy.
Right, absolutely. See you.
Remember, if you'd like to join us for Ask the Quarterback, all you have to do is send me an email at brillpro@gmail.com. That's brillpro@gmail.com. And if we select your name, we'll get in touch with you, bring you on the next show, and with that email, and you can see that email right now at the bottom of your screen. So let's get right to the games of the week, starting with the Colts and Titans. Colts disappoint at times, as do the Titans. Titans' only dependable point makers are Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown. Now, I do like Michael Pittman and the fact that he's finally getting some playing time. Dynasty coaches, he's a bargain, and a USC wide receiver who's always someone who's going to shine in the NFL. T.Y. Hilton could still be out there, which will affect Pittman's playing time.
Unfortunately for Matt, who just left, I'm not going to recommend any Colts here because there's just, even though it's a sometimes weak Titans defense, there's just no Colt offensive players, including Jonathan Smith, who come week to week and always produce. And it's too much of a crapshoot for me. On the other hand, I do like the Titans, some players, and I'll even add a couple to the ones you mentioned, in Johnny Smith, who came back, a couple weeks ago, caught another touchdown pass. Not great productive numbers outside of catching that one touchdown, but he's always a red zone threat. And then you add Ryan Tannehill in there, who, remember, they played the Bears a few weeks back, and he had a solid game against them. Here, his last game, another tough defense, throws no interceptions, and a couple of touchdown passes. So I think I'd add him to the mix as a potential starter as well.
Eagles at Giants. Eagles coming off a bye, and like I said, I'm off Carson Wentz for now. Mentioned that last week. So for the Giants, I'm liking Wayne Gallman as at least a flex, and Austin Mack is an interesting choice at wide receiver. 4 catches for 72 yards on 5 targets. He'll get you a few points anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you on Gallman because when the season began, what he is probably always going to be, certainly when Saquon Barkley comes back, is a versatile changeup back, but possesses a lot of the same skills as Saquon Barkley. Maybe not quite the top end speed, but still a valuable inside runner, a valuable receiver out of the backfield. And now that he's the feature back, we've seen a lot of that progress in him and production out of him this year. And then you've got Daniel Jones, who's a young quarterback still, and has a comfort blanket now in Wayne Gallman. You can see that trend week in and week out showing up. I as far as Matt goes, I think, he had a good game, but I think consistency-wise for the Giants, still, their most consistent receiver is Sterling Shepard. And that's a guy that I would, he's not going to produce big numbers every week, but he's going to produce big numbers enough that he's someone I would consider playing.
Jaguars and Packers. I like Jake Luton, another rookie quarterback coming through. And even though they are playing the Packers, I still like him to have a good day. He'll rely on James Robinson, and you should too. And while DJ Chalk will get double coverage, that should give Chris Conley some more targets. Now, he's coming off an 8 target, 7 catch game for the Pack. I was impressed with Tyler Ervin. He's a decent flex play. Also keep an eye on Aaron Jones' possible injuries. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is a flex option. He's not getting targets, but he is getting end zone looks, which is important.
Well, the Packers sure answered for their head scratcher against the Vikings the week before, right? And now they come out against the 49ers and, again, light it up. As for Jake Luton, came out of Oregon State by way of Ventura Junior College, which is up by me. And, impressed. I don't think the Jaguars skipped a beat with him stepping in for Gardner Minshew. And obviously, I think James Robinson, he's going to continue to rely on. all you got to do is look back at that last game, and really every game. That guy shows up huge. He's a big red zone threat as well. And I think DJ Chark, while you would think, okay, they may target him on defense and double him up a little bit, yet last week there was no drop off. Jake Luton obviously is in very comfortable looking for him, and he got open. And I think that'll continue. And I think that, as you mentioned, Chris Conley is also an excellent play moving forward. And so it doesn't seem to matter who's at quarterback for the Jaguars, whether it's Minshew or Luton. I think they're both going to be productive.
Washington at the Lions. Matt Stafford seems to have come out of the concussion protocol okay. TJ Hawkinson caught 5 of 8 targets for a score. Ride DeAndre Swift again and dump Adrian Peterson. Amendola for flex. Pick up Cam Sims because he's likely available. The wideout caught 3 of 4 targets for 110 yards to nearly match Terry McLaurin, who had 115 and a score. Now, if you need a quarterback, I'm sure Alex Smith is available, and he will start against Detroit.
Yeah, well, okay, to go back to the Lions, as we've said all season, Hawkinson is a top shelf fantasy tight end because he consistently produces, not just out in the field, in the red zone, and he showed up again with another touchdown and this past game. And I think DJ Swift, as I mentioned before in our discussion with Matt, coming off a good game. And then, as far as the Washington football team, as remarkable as Alex Smith's comeback is, he still last week threw more interceptions than touchdowns. And while, if you don't have another fantasy quarterback to possibly start, I still don't know if I would start Alex Smith. I think it's just too young, too new, I guess, in his return. I would almost go with somebody like a Jake Luton or, a team that shows they're going to throw the ball. The Jaguars are likely going to be trying to play catch up an entire game. So I think that's someone like that's going to be throwing the ball a lot and be productive is a potential option as well.
Texans and Browns. Deshaun Watson saw it again. So are Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks. Look for Duke Johnson this week because David Johnson might be out again. Duke for David is really a decent trade-off. Duke had 16 rushes, 4 catches last week. He's an excellent pass receiver. That's basically what he's been through his career. Mayfield went into the bye week on the COVID list, but testing negative. So you need to keep an eye on him. If he can't go, Case Keenum is your man. And right now, so many guys on IR, this team's a mess. Landry and Hunt, to me, are your only means of real solid points.
Yeah, I'm with you on this regarding the Texans. Watson is solid every week. I don't care what defense they're going to face. And the combination of Fuller and Cooks is now probably as good as any 2 receiver combination in the league. And as for the Browns, it's just, I can't tell you, it's confusing. I mean, they're coming off a bye week, and yet you think, okay, well, this is a time that now they were already playing kind of good going into the bye week, but then they, Baker Mayfield's kind of mixed up in this COVID protocol. And, did he miss any significant practice time? We don't know. And I just think it's just, like you said, I mean, you've got, Landry and Hunt are 2 good options, but are they really every week? I don't know. And if you've got, I guess more consistent players, more consistent options, I would probably go with them than either one of those 2.
Buccaneers at Panthers. McCaffrey's back. I like Bridgewater somewhat against the Bucs D, and I'd stick with Robbie Anderson as consistent, although the Bucs were mauled by New Orleans, but Carolina is not New Orleans, so I'm not sold on Brady here either.
Yeah, I have no problem myself starting Bridgewater against the Bucs defense. He obviously
you've liked him all year.
I have, and he's good, and he's shown why. It's not just me that likes him, and I think the Carolina Panthers are pretty happy with his production as well this year. And kind of like Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, Bridgewater's having a quiet, productive season. I mean, very productive. He's throwing up around 70% or more, if not more than that. So, and McCaffrey obviously came back. You'd think he'd be rusty, but obviously wasn't. Came back and lit it up. And so I think for that reason, I like the Panthers' choices, even against the Buccaneers defense, who took a big stumble.
Chargers at Dolphins. Dolphins don't give up, which means you got to like these guys. I love the kicker, Jason Sanders. I love Tua. He's playing very well, but Preston Williams is questionable. So look at Jakeem Grant to go along with Devontae Parker at receiver. We like Herbert here for the Chargers, along with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Hunter Henry should be considered as well.
Well, to go back to the Dolphins, Tua's second start, very impressive, I thought, versus the Cardinals. And I thought it would take him a little bit longer really to get going and be as productive. But he obviously made plays with his legs. He made plays in the air. He threw the game, tying or scoring, winning touchdown. And then obviously they had the kick at the end of the game that helped win it in overtime. And I think that, Miami, I think, like you said, they've kind of had so many injuries that it's hard to really know who Tua is going to be throwing the ball to or handing off to. But I think, he showed me a lot. And I think the Chargers, like I've said earlier, kind of all season, everybody's remarked on it, that, why they can't win a game at the end. They found another way last week to, lose a game, which they played very well in. And Herbert's playing well. The one guy that I would say that you mentioned, Mike Williams, what I heard and what I saw in the highlights was that he hit his head on a sideline catch, came down, and is in the concussion protocol right now. So not sure how, even if he does play, how effective he's going to be. And then he might not even play. And so, which I think then you mentioned Hunter Henry. If Mike Williams is a no-go, or even if he is, will he be that productive? Which then tells me Hunter Henry's another guy invaluable in the red zone.
Next man step up. The Chargers need to lobby for a change in the NFL rules to make it a 58-minute football game. Broncos and Raiders.
Something's got to change because they're playing too well to be, what are they, 2-6, 2-7? So, it's hopefully, over time that thing gets corrected. But I just hope that Anthony Lynn survives the season, because I think he's a heck of a coach. And hopefully if he can survive, I think this team's going to be headed in the right direction.
I think so too. Broncos and Raiders. Tim Patrick did play, caught 4 for 29 and a touchdown, so he's solid again. Drew Lock is serviceable. I definitely like KJ Hamler. I'd sit Philip Lindsay after missing 3 targets. He just does not inspire me. And Melvin Gordon kind of off last week, but has a favorable matchup this time out. So he's back to being a solid RB2 at least. Josh Jacobs and Devontae Booker split the running back duties and did a mere job on fantasy points. So if your option is one of these, pick them, but realize the split time. Broncos run D solid, so you may want to reconsider here.
Yeah, aren't the Broncos a hard team to figure out? I mean, they've got what seems to be a good nucleus of players. They've got a good coaching staff, and yet they again kind of like the Chargers, find ways to not win games. And I can't figure it out, because one week Drew Lock looks great, another week comes back and very average. And Tim Patrick, I think, like he said, has stepped up, and for now anyway, seems to be a guy you can rely on. But I love, to switch sides a second, I love what the Raiders and Gruden are doing this season, especially on offense. Derek Carr, I think, is playing lights out. He's elevated his game and continues to, not just what he's done in the early part of his career, but even throughout this very season we're in. He's mobile. He makes good decisions. He is resourceful, gets out of tight situations in the pocket, makes plays downfield. And for that reason, guys like Darren Waller and Henry Ruggs and Nelson Aguilar right now in the last couple weeks has really stepped up, and not only yards wise, but is getting into the end zone consistently. So you've got some options, I think, with the Raiders offensively, at least.
Bills and Cardinals. Bills back on track, so is Josh Allen, but the Cardinals are flying high. I'd say if you have any of these guys, start them, because it looks like this could be a fantasy point stream on both sides.
I mean, seriously, ditto, I would say. And that, I have to believe, and think about what the Cardinals did, Murray did offensively, and that's with DeAndre Hopkins not even being around. I mean, 3 catches I think he had. So yeah. I think with his 1 week sabbatical, you got to think that he's going to be back and become Murray's number 1 option again, like he's been all year. And then both of these offenses are at the top of the NFL in terms of production. So like you said, you got anyone on either one of these teams offensively, start them.
49ers at Saints. For the Niners, I like Mullins, Richie James, and McKinnon. But I also like Ross Dwelly with Kittle on IR. Drew Brees and Taysom Hill. All the rest of the weapons, you got to believe this should be a strong fantasy points game. I looked it up because I ended up picking up Taysom Hill last night. And the reason I did is he's technically listed in the ESPN leagues as a tight end. So you don't have to put him in as a quarterback. You can play him as a tight end. And that way you take advantage of special teams, running back, receiver, and his quarterback. So it's sort of a super flex position.
And when he comes in at quarterback, he's going to be running the ball.
Yeah.
So, which is going to, open him up for red zone touchdowns and whatever else. He ripped off a big run the other day. Like you said, because you can put him in and out at a position other than quarterback. They're going to work him into every offensive game plan, whether it's they throw him a pass and then he makes a double pass after that, or, he's fast. He can run reverses. There's a lot he can add to your fantasy team. To switch over to the 49ers, to me, last week against the Green Bay Packers, this is the first time that I can remember that the 49ers, and Mullins in particular, just looked lost for a lot of the game. And yes, Richie James stepped up and came out of nowhere and had a big game. But can he do this consistently? I don't know. I don't think so, because the Saints are a dynamic defense and they've got options on the back end. They can, if they wanted to, they can, when they will. I believe that no other, real receiving options. I think the Saints game plan going in is going to stop the one guy that they have to stop, and that's Richie James.
Yeah.
And I think they have the defense to do that. I think the Saints offensively, as you pointed out, and everybody knows, they've got weapons galore. I can't remember if it was this past game or the game before, where Drew Brees completed passes to 12 different receivers. How many teams even have 12 different options? I don't know, but I doubt they're going to hit them all in one game. And so I think the Saints right now are playing at a much different level than the 49ers, even though going into the season, the 49ers, on paper at least, look to be top shelf themselves.
I got to think that Brees really cherished the moments against Tom Brady when he outdid him earlier this week. And the funny thing was, every shot you saw of Brees coming off the field was big old smile.
Yeah, right. Ever since they doubted him. Remember a few weeks ago, does he really still have his fastball? And is the game passing by? And ever since those comments started to be made, he's been playing as well as any quarterback in the league.
And Tom Brady was...
I know. He's got some things to answer for, and hopefully he will this week on the field.
Seahawks at Rams. Rams coming off a bye. Seahawks defense coming off 44 points given up. Can they pull it back together? The Rams receivers match or even are better than the Bills. Start them and Goff. Rams D is solid, but so is the Seattle offense. Obviously, we like Russell Wilson and DJ Metcalf. I like DJ Dallas again, but only as a flex against the Rams D. And you have to watch the injury list, because if Carson comes back, that's going to take away from DJ Dallas's carries, which he wasn't in last week, and Dallas had a decent game.
Yeah, this is where the NFL gets a little tricky, in that you've got the Rams that are, to me, solid, extremely solid on both sides of the ball, where Seattle is solid really just on one. And then you've got the Rams coming off a bye week. So they sat back and watched Seattle's game, and then they're going to come up. They've been working on Seattle now for a couple of weeks, I guarantee it. And so they're going to come up with ways to slow down that offense, even though it's going to be difficult. Russell Wilson's in a class of his own when it comes to quarterback play, but and he's got some weapons. But if there's a team out there that can wreak havoc on defense, it's the Rams. And I don't necessarily. I think that's going to spell ultimately, in terms of win and loss, who wins this game. I think the Rams will win this game for that reason. And like you said, I think offensively, the Rams are just that outside zone run game they've got, coupled with the play action pass that comes off of it, and the sort of maniacal way that Sean McVay goes about designing game plans and calling plays. I think they're really tough for any defense to shut down.
Bengals and Steelers. Now, the big question here is, will Ben be cleared from the COVID list in time to play? If he can't, then it's Mason Rudolph. Now, no rush so far to pick up Rudolph, who is owned in less than 1% of ESPN leagues. Mike Tomlin's rule is, if you don't practice on Friday, which Ben cannot by rule, then you don't play on Sunday. The question is, will he make an exception for Ben? Maybe, if Ben tests negative on Saturday. My guess is later in the week, you're going to see action on Ben and also on Mason Rudolph. Now, actually, I do like Joshua Dobbs here, especially the third string quarterback who backs up Rudolph. Because if Rudolph can't do it, or if Rudolph gets hurt, Dobbs, who is owned in 0 leagues, 0, steps up and is very, very good. A final note on Ben, maybe this is a chance to rest those injured knees. So Connor is a play along with the rest of the Steelers, but I would not use the kicker Boswell. He's been inconsistent lately, which he's been at times in the past. And coming off a bye, Burrow is going to be harassed by the Steeler defense. So you have another option. I would say go with it.
Well, I know how you love your Steelers defense, and rightfully so. But please name me a defense this year that has stopped Joe Burrow.
That's true. No, you're right.
So that means that I still like T. Higgins to go along with him. They don't really have any other consistent weapons. Maybe Tyler Boyd, but certainly in the running game, none exist. And as for the Steelers, if Ben doesn't play and Mason Rudolph does play, this game to me could make or break the rest of his NFL career, or at least as it sits in Pittsburgh. Not that he couldn't have an NFL career resurrected, a la Jim Plunkett, after a series of failures in a couple of other teams. He came back and resurrected his career, won a couple Super Bowls with the Raiders. So, but at least for Pittsburgh, I think this is a make it or break it game that could either send his career this way in Pittsburgh or that way. And I think if Roethlisberger does play, I'd still recommend the same Steeler receivers, starting with Smith-Schuster and Claypool, both of them have been productive, especially lately.
The interesting thing is, the Steelers have always said, from management's point of view, that Mason Rudolph's their guy, Mason Rudolph's their guy, Mason Rudolph's their guy. But after trading Joshua Dobbs a couple of years ago, they went out and signed him again. They like Joshua Dobbs, and I think a lot of people do. And he's one of those hybrid quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson or like Deshaun Watson, who does a lot of running. And the guy's cerebral. He literally is a rocket scientist, which Ben loves about him. I saw a quote not too long ago where Ben says he loves talking to him because he's probably the smartest guy in the NFL, at least if you judge by education and that type of stuff. The Ravens and Patriots. Now, this is an interesting game. And while I like Belichick here, I think the Ravens just have too much firepower. I don't look for Lamar Jackson to rebound. I think he's in a bit of a funk. And Dobbins and Edwards don't inspire me at running back. Mark Andrews will rebound at tight end. But even given all of that, I still think they have something more than the Patriots do.
Well, talking about the Patriots, okay, for Patriot fans, let's not get carried away with one win over the winless Jets. And Newton had 2 rushing touchdowns, but 0 passing touchdowns. And that's why I think ever since he got that COVID, he has not looked the same at all throwing the ball. And I think the Ravens does get back on track this week, and especially Lamar Jackson. The Patriots have given up, quite a few fantasy points defensively this year, even though they started out hot. They had a week early schedule, and now that they've played some solid teams, I think they've exposed some of the defensive weaknesses that a lot of the opt-outs early in the season helped create. And I think Lamar is so dynamic, not only as a passer, really more as a runner, but also as a passer, that I think guys like Mark Andrews do get back on track this week. And whether or not, Dobbins and the running game get on track, Lamar Jackson's also part of that running game, which I think he'll be on track, not only running, but passing the ball this week. Hollywood Brown, I think, also then becomes a good option.
Vikings and Bears. So I have to ask you a question here. Did you ever throw 52 times in one game?
I had to look it up, but I knew before I looked it up. It was a game against the Jets back. I just had to look up what year it was. Back in '97 with the Bears, we played the Jets in a home game, which I actually threw 60 times.
Did you really?
I think because now that I think back about it, it was a lot of check with me's at the line of scrimmage. So if you check with me and I got a run or a pass, I can tell you which one I'm going with.
So did your arm fall off after that, or how much ice did you put on it after the game?
Getting warmed up. I think, if you look at this game, it's going to be in Chicago, and I think the Allen Robinson for me, just because the Bears have so many sort of, I would say, question marks, but they're not really. They're sort of confirmed disappointments that I think Allen Robinson, though, through it all, has managed to stay established as not just their number one receiving threat, but league-wide. He is, stayed at the top of his game, which has kept him at the top of the NFL game receiving-wise. And I think Dalvin Cook is this year's talk of the town for Minnesota. I would still ride him, although he's not going to get the same production he got last week against this Bears defense. I still think of him as an every week start. And the Bears defense at times this year, although not, I wouldn't consider them a lower level team. In fact, they're not. They're an upper level defense, but they have shown some vulnerabilities sometimes this year, especially in the running game.
I think you have to keep an eye on Montgomery. He went into the concussion protocol. We'll see how that bears out. And for the Vikings, Dalvin Cook on a roll. I don't think you can depend on anybody else on the Vikes for points, and you have to run Dalvin Cook. I mean, 2 weeks in a row, he's at over 200 yards. So now you can go ice your arm, by the way. There you have it. Kramer and Brill, a fantasy football podcast, now a video cast as well. You can hear the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, Radio.com, and wherever you get your podcasts. And now you can also see the video cast on YouTube by going to my Bob Brill YouTube channel. Or you can find the links for all of this at kramerandbrill.com. That's the easiest way. Don't forget about a brand new feature, Ask the Quarterback. Each week, we'll select a fan who writes in to ask Eric a fantasy football related question. We'll bring the fan onto the video cast to ask the question directly. And you can be that fan by simply emailing us at brillpro@gmail.com. That's brillpro@gmail.com right there on the bottom of your screen. For my friend and colleague, Eric Kramer, I'm Bob Brill. We'll see you next time.